Welcome to Shatter.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. She stood across from me with her arms folded, eyes cold, and started listing every single thing that made me hard to love. Not in anger, not in rage, but with the precision of someone who thought she was delivering truth. You don't communicate well. You're too quiet around people. You're not ambitious enough. You play it too safe. You dress like you don't care. You're just dull sometimes. She paused like she was expecting a reaction, maybe defensiveness, maybe shame. She didn't get either. Instead, I nodded once, calm as ever. Then I gave her the only response I knew would hit harder than any insult. Okay. That's all. Just okay. No defense. No explanation. No trying to win her back. And that silence? That calm reply? It ruined her more than if I'd screamed. Because the moment you stop needing someone's approval, you stop playing their game. Let me rewind. This didn't start with one argument. It started quietly, slowly, like rot in a house you think is solid, until one day the floor caves in. Her name's Claire. When we met, she praised every part of me she would later weaponize. My calm nature. Back then, it was grounding. My simple lifestyle. Comforting. My routine. Stable. But stability doesn't shine on Instagram. And over time, my quiet confidence became boring. My predictability became weakness. My peace. She called it passivity. I didn't change. She just got tired of not being able to mold me. She started comparing me to her coworkers' husbands, louder, flashier men. Men who overshared online and took credit for every small win. She'd joke about how boring I was in front of friends. Roll her eyes when I'd suggest a night in. Talk over me in public, then accuse me of checking out. It wasn't blatant at first. It was death by paper cuts. And the worst part? For a while, I believed her. I thought maybe I was too quiet, too plain, too insufficient. But then something shifted. One night, I caught myself Googling, how to be more interesting for your wife. And I froze. That was the moment I realized. I wasn't the one failing. I was just being drained by someone who fed off feeling superior. That's when I started reclaiming pieces of myself. Not loudly, not dramatically, but piece by piece, until the man she tried to tear down became immune to her words. So when she stood there, that afternoon, delivering her rehearsed list of flaws, I didn't flinch. Because I had finally figured it out. You don't need to yell when someone tries to define you. You just have to not care. And that's what she couldn't handle. After that moment, after I told her, okay, and walked away, something in the house shifted. Not physically, but in the air. She didn't speak to me for the rest of the evening. Not because she was angry, but because silence was supposed to be my punishment. The problem was, I wasn't the same man anymore. Her silence didn't echo. It just confirmed what I already knew. I had outgrown the version of myself who needed her validation. I used to chase harmony. Always the one to ask what was wrong. To fix what I didn't even break. But now I let the silence stretch. The next day, she tried again. Not with insults. With questions, disguised as concern. Why don't you ever speak up for yourself? Why do you shut down when I bring up real things? Don't you care what I think? I looked her in the eye and said, not anymore. Her lips parted like she wanted to fire back, but nothing came out. She wasn't used to that version of me. Calm, unshaken, unreachable. That was the turning point. See, she was never trying to help me grow. She was trying to shape me into something easier for her to manage. And when I stopped molding, she panicked. I started doing the little things differently. Woke up earlier. Went to the gym without telling her. Made breakfast and ate alone. Not out of spite. Out of peace. She'd walk into the kitchen, expecting the old routine. Me waiting for her, asking if she wanted coffee, making small talk. Instead, she walked into silence. Into independence. Into a man who no longer built his day around her approval. She noticed. Of course she did. She'd linger in doorways. Ask if everything was okay. I kept it simple. Everything's fine. And it was. Because for the first time in years, I was choosing myself. She used to joke that I was too easy to please. Now she couldn't reach me. Couldn't sway me. Couldn't guilt me into playing the part. That's when she started spiraling. She began texting more when I was out. Where are you? When will you be back? What are you doing? I didn't lie. I just didn't explain. That's the part that drove her crazy. Because control only works when the other person needs something from you. And I didn't need anything anymore. Not her reassurance. Not her comfort. Not her idea of who I should be. The real power isn't in clapping back. It's in becoming unreachable. She tried to provoke me with criticism, but I didn't come back with defense. I came back with silence. And that silence said everything she was afraid to hear. You don't define me anymore. By midweek, she switched tactics. The sharp critique stopped. In their place came concern. You've been distant lately. Is everything okay between us? I just want to understand what's going on. The irony? Now that I had no interest in defending myself, she was suddenly interested in understanding me. But it wasn't real curiosity. It was control dressed as compassion. She wasn't used to a version of me she couldn't steer. She tried sitting beside me one evening on the couch. Usually, she'd scroll while talking over the movie. This time, she stayed quiet, watched my face more than the screen. Then, just above a whisper, "You've changed." I didn't look at her. I didn't pause the movie. I just said I needed to. She waited for more. Some follow-up. Some opening. But I gave her nothing. Because I wasn't here to soothe her confusion. I was here to live with clarity. Her usual tools, disapproval, silence, sudden compliments, they all bounced off me now. Because when someone has studied your insecurities and used them as levers, the moment you take those levers away, they panic. And that panic doesn't always look like screaming. Sometimes, it looks like her standing in the doorway at night, asking if I still love her. Sometimes, it's her making dinner unannounced, something I used to like. Sometimes, it's her calling her mom just loud enough for me to hear and say things like, "He's cold lately. I think he's shutting down again." Again? No, this wasn't shutting down. This was waking up. The difference now? I wasn't reacting. And without reaction, her entire framework collapsed. See, she never wanted me to be a better man. She wanted a man she could always be better than. And when I stopped playing that role, she lost her script. I started staying late at work. Not to avoid her, just because I liked who I was outside of that house. I reconnected with old friends. Picked up hobbies I'd shelved for years. Not to prove anything, just to remember what it felt like to exist outside her gaze. She noticed. Of course she did. She asked why I didn't invite her anymore. Why I didn't check in. I said, "You never really asked about those parts of me before." That hit harder than I expected. Because deep down, she knew it was true. She never loved those parts of me. She tolerated them, tried to shape them, tried to fix what was never broken. And now, those same parts were the reason I was rising. While she was slowly losing grip, the version of me that needed her applause, gone. What was left? A man who didn't ask for approval, because he already knew his worth. She started testing the waters again, but this time, not with concern. With old tricks. Backhanded comments slipped into casual moments. "You always wear that jacket. Must be nice to come home and do nothing. You get quiet when people are around. Do you even like being social?" The delivery was the same as before. Passive, smooth, with a hint of superiority. But I didn't flinch. Didn't justify. Didn't rise to it. I just let the words fall. Because that's what happens when someone stops being your mirror. Their opinions stop reflecting who you are. She needed a reaction. Not because she was angry, but because that was the last thread of control she had left. And when that thread snapped, she came undone. That Friday, I got home from work later than usual. I walked through the door, and she was standing there with a glass of wine in one hand and my old college hoodie in the other. "This used to be your favorite," she said. I nodded. "It's worn out." That was it. No nostalgia. No smile. No warmth. She stood frozen like she couldn't believe how little I gave her. But the truth is, I'd already stopped living in the past. I had accepted the most important truth of all. Just because someone knew you for years doesn't mean they ever saw you. She had memorized my habits, but she never understood my values. So I stopped trying to explain them. I started using my energy on things that added to me, not drained me. At work, I was leading bigger projects. I wasn't just surviving, I was winning. I'd wake up early, hit the gym, make coffee, and sit in silence. Not because I was alone, because I was at peace. She noticed the shift. Started dressing up more at home. Wearing makeup even on off days. She'd hover when I spoke on the phone, trying to listen. Asked if I was seeing someone. I wasn't. But the fact that she even asked told me everything. She no longer believed I needed her. She was right. The day she truly lost her grip wasn't loud. It was subtle, simple. We were sitting on opposite ends of the couch. She asked if I wanted to do something that weekend, go hiking, get dinner, maybe revisit the lake house. I said, "You can go if you want." No sarcasm, no spite, just truth. And that's when she looked at me like she was finally seeing a man she no longer understood. Because I didn't say no. I didn't say yes. I said, "You can go." Translation: I'm not here to fix it. I'm not here to fight for it. And I'm not here for you anymore. She went to the lake house that weekend. Alone. She packed quietly Friday afternoon. Slow, hesitant, like she was waiting for me to stop her. Waiting for some version of the old me to show up and say, "Let's go together." But I didn't. I let her leave. I even held the door open. The silence after she drove off wasn't empty. It was clean. The kind of quiet that doesn't ache, it liberates. I sat on the porch that night, beer in hand, watching the sun dip below the trees. No phone in reach. No anxious thoughts. Just stillness. It hit me then. I wasn't just surviving her anymore. I was done needing her. 2 years ago, I would have driven up there in the middle of the night after one unanswered call. A year ago, I would have sent a long message, apologizing for how distant I'd been. But now, I didn't even wonder what she was doing. Because it didn't matter. She'd already said everything she needed to when she listed my flaws. Those weren't offhand remarks. They were convictions. And what made them brutal wasn't that they were lies. It's that she thought saying them would motivate me. But I wasn't looking to be remodeled. I was looking to be respected. And now that I'd stopped chasing her approval, she had nothing to hold over me. When she came back Sunday night, she looked different. Not relaxed. Not rested. Just unsettled. She barely spoke. Walked past me with a quick, "Hey," like we were roommates. I didn't stop her. Didn't ask how the trip went. Didn't fill the silence. She paced that evening. Cleaned things that didn't need cleaning. Tried to make noise in a space that no longer revolved around her. And I read. I cooked. I folded laundry in silence. Her frustration wasn't explosive. It was quiet, restrained, because she still didn't understand what she was fighting against. This wasn't passive aggression. This was peace. Real peace. The kind you can't manipulate. The kind you can't reach once someone builds it without you. That night, she asked if I still loved her. I didn't lie. I didn't perform. I simply said, "I don't know what that means anymore." And I watched something crack behind her eyes. Not because I yelled, not because I blamed her, but because she finally understood. There's nothing more dangerous to a person who feeds off control than the moment they realize they no longer have access. Not to your heart, not to your fear, not even to your attention. She left the room without a word. And for once, I didn't follow, because I wasn't trying to win her back. I was too busy rebuilding the man she thought she'd broken for good. A few days after the lake house, she started playing the memory game. Old songs. Old stories. She'd mention our first trip together, how we laughed for hours over nothing. She found my favorite sweatshirt from college and left it folded neatly on my side of the bed. Subtle cues. Nostalgic bait. She was trying to resurrect a version of us that only existed before she decided I wasn't enough. But I wasn't chasing history anymore. I was building distance. Not out of bitterness. Out of clarity. One morning, she walked in wearing the same perfume she used the night we got engaged. She stood in front of me, waiting for me to say something. I didn't. Not because I didn't notice. Because I didn't care. She'd weaponized those memories before. Used them to pull me back in, just when I was almost free. Now, they held no weight. That was the part she didn't understand. I hadn't just lost interest. I had detached. Fully. Cleanly. She started asking more questions at night. The kind that sounded gentle, but came with hooks. "Do you still see a future with me? Are we okay? Do you still want this?" And I answered every single one, the same way. I don't know. No warmth. No edge. Just a man telling the truth with nothing left to prove. She cried once. Not loudly. Just quietly. Alone in the hallway. Thought I couldn't hear. I did. And I didn't move. Because this wasn't the first time I'd heard those tears. But it was the first time they weren't a performance. They were real. Because she was finally starting to feel what I'd lived through in silence for years. That same ache. That same hollowness. The difference? I had learned to survive it. She was just now meeting it. And it terrified her. She tried to reset the rhythm. Movie nights, cooking together, date suggestions. But I declined each one, calmly. No excuse. No drama. Because when someone tries to rebuild connection without accountability, it's not love. It's strategy. And I wasn't playing anymore. She even brought up therapy. Said she was willing to go. Said she'd work on herself. But therapy isn't a tool you use when someone's leaving. It's a commitment you make when someone is still trying. And I wasn't. That's when she said the one thing she thought would stop me cold. I miss you. But missing someone doesn't fix what you broke on purpose. So I looked at her and replied, you miss who I was when I still needed your approval. And I walked away. Not in anger. Not in pain. But in peace. The kind of peace you earn when you finally stop bleeding for someone who never knew how to hold you. She started spiraling. Not in loud ways, but in subtle, scattered patterns. The kind of unraveling you only notice when you've already detached. She'd forget things. Misplace keys. Leave laundry half-folded. Dinner burned twice in 1 week. Something that never used to happen. She wasn't sleeping either. I could hear her pacing at 2 a.m., shuffling around the kitchen like movement would solve something. But I didn't ask if she was okay. I didn't check in. Because we were long past the point where my concern still counted. She had spent years critiquing my silence. Now she was learning what real silence sounded like. And this time, it wasn't passive. It was final. She asked me once, half joking, half terrified, are you planning to leave me? I looked at her, calm, steady, and said, I think you already left me a long time ago. You just didn't pack a bag. She didn't respond. Because there was no comeback to that. Only recognition. She had taken for granted the quiet man who once gave her everything. His time, his patience, his forgiveness. And now she was staring at the man who had none of that left to give. I stopped sharing updates with her. About work, about family, even about small wins in my life. Not out of secrecy, out of detachment. Because you don't share victories with someone who once turned your voice into background noise. She noticed. And that's when the panic took shape. She started texting me during the day, little check-ins she never used to send. Hope your day's going well. Let me know if you want to grab dinner later. I was thinking we could talk tonight. But I didn't reply. I'd come home, and she'd be standing there, done up, smiling too wide, offering to cook, to watch a movie, to go for a walk. And every time, I'd tell her, maybe another night. Not to hurt her, but because I was no longer interested in pretending. Because pretending to care is worse than walking away. She began watching me more closely, like I was slipping through her fingers, like she'd just now realized what she was about to lose. But it wasn't about to happen. It had already happened. She just hadn't caught up yet. And the final blow wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a fight or a revelation. It was this. She reached for my hand one night while we watched TV. And I didn't pull away. I just didn't respond. My hand stayed still, like hers wasn't even there. And in that moment, she finally understood. I hadn't stopped loving her to punish her. I'd stopped because the version of her I once loved didn't exist anymore. That week, she cooked every night. Full meals, appetizers, even dessert, candles on the table, music low, her phone flipped upside down for the first time in years. She was trying to rewind the tape, back to when we laughed over dinner, back to when I still leaned in when she touched my arm. But the problem with rewinding a tape? You can't erase the damage. You just watch it play slower. She asked if I wanted to go away for the weekend. A reset, she called it. So we could talk things out. No pressure. Just the two of us. I told her I had plans. I didn't explain them. Because they weren't her business anymore. I could see the cracks behind her smile. She thought I was punishing her. But this wasn't about punishment. It was about finally realizing that a man can't heal in the same place that made him bleed. She left a photo on my dresser, an old picture of us on the beach. Back when we were younger, before her voice turned into a checklist of everything I wasn't. I looked at it for a second, then dropped it in the drawer without a word. She followed me into the kitchen later that night, tried to laugh at something I said under my breath. I didn't laugh back. Not because I was being cruel. Because I had nothing left to give. She was reaching for a version of me she'd buried under sarcasm and silent treatment. And now that she missed him, he was already gone. I watched her closely that evening. The way she hovered near me without speaking. The way she kept glancing, waiting for a spark. But she was chasing a ghost. And I had become untouchable. That was the real shift. She didn't need to be yelled at. She didn't need a dramatic speech. She needed to feel what I had felt for years. Unseen. Unheard. Unchosen. Only difference? I survived it. She was drowning in it. And when someone tries to pull you back just to save themselves, you learn the most powerful thing you can do is stand still. Not cruel. Not cold. Just done. That night, as she turned off the lights and walked to the bedroom alone, she paused and asked, "Do you still believe in us?" I looked up at her and said, calm, steady, "I believe in peace. And that's not what this is." She didn't follow up. She just nodded. Slowly. Because deep down, even she knew, you can't rebuild something you destroyed out of comfort. And now, she was the only one left trying to pick up pieces of a version of us that no longer existed. I woke up early that Friday. Earlier than usual. Not to sneak out. Not to avoid a fight. But because endings deserve clarity. I made coffee. Sat in silence. Watched the steam rise from the mug while the world outside stayed dark and still. And then I did what she never thought I would. I packed. Not in a rush. Not in anger. But with precision. I had already lined up a short-term lease across town. Already signed the documents. Already moved half my things out, quietly, piece by piece over the last few weeks. Bank accounts? Separated. Joint cards? Closed. Passwords? Changed. It wasn't revenge. It was structure. The kind you build when you've made peace with walking away, not because you're bitter, but because staying would be a betrayal to yourself. She woke up around 7. Stepped into the hallway, still in her robe, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She saw the duffel bag, the empty hangers, the paperwork, and for a second, her face blanked, like her mind couldn't register what her eyes were seeing. Then came the words. Not loud, not screamed, just, "You're really doing this." I looked at her. Not cruel, not cold, just finished. I said, "I already did." She stepped closer. Her voice cracked. "But I've been trying." I cut her off, not with words, but with stillness. Because when someone tries to fix the damage only after they realize you're leaving, it's not healing. It's panic. She stood in front of me, hands trembling slightly, waiting for some flicker of the old me. The man who would hug her. The man who would delay his freedom for the sake of comfort. The man who would apologize just to keep things from falling apart. But that man didn't live here anymore. I told her I'd leave the keys on the counter, that the paperwork was finalized, that I wouldn't make a scene. And I meant it. Because real strength isn't slamming the door. It's locking it quietly behind you. She asked one last thing before I reached the door. Was any of it real? And I paused. Because I knew what she was really asking. Was I ever enough? But she never asked herself that question when I was in the hallway crying silently. When I was Googling how to be better. When I was erasing pieces of myself to fit her expectations. So I didn't answer. Not out of cruelty. But because some questions aren't mine to solve. I opened the door. Stepped out into the morning light. And behind me, I left nothing. No letters. No goodbye note. No trace of the man she once knew. Because sometimes the most powerful way to say this is over is to not say anything at all. It's been 3 months since I left. She's texted maybe a dozen times. Nothing dramatic, just fragments. Hope you're okay. Can we talk sometime? Just wondering if you'd ever consider meeting. But I never responded. Not because I'm angry. Because there's nothing left to say. Closure isn't a conversation. It's a decision. And I made mine when I stopped asking for permission to feel whole. The truth is, I don't hate her. I don't wish her pain. I just finally realized that peace doesn't require understanding from the person who broke you. It requires distance. And I've never been clearer. My mornings start different now. No tension. No second guessing. Just breath. Routine. Movement. I go to the gym. I see my friends. I read more. I even started learning the guitar again, something she always called a waste of time. Funny how the things they once mocked become the things that remind you who you were before them. Sometimes people ask what happened. I just say, we outgrew the illusion. Because that's what it was, an illusion. Of love. Of partnership. Of respect. All held together by my effort to not make her uncomfortable. And when that effort stopped, so did the illusion. I saw a photo of her recently. A mutual friend posted it. She looked good, smiling, surrounded by people. And for a second, I wondered if she had changed. But then I remembered. It doesn't matter. Because even if she had, I'm not walking back into a version of myself that needed to be rescued from silence. She'll tell people I was the one who gave up. She'll rewrite the timeline. Say I got cold. Say I just walked out. And that's fine. Because the version of me that needed to be understood by everyone, he left the house that day with his last duffel bag. Now I don't explain. I don't defend. I don't apologize for choosing myself. She wanted closure. She wanted the tearful goodbye, the one last fight, the last-ditch promise to change. But I gave her none of it. Because sometimes silence is the cleanest goodbye you can offer. It leaves no space for manipulation, no entry point for guilt, no room for revision, just a full stop. And the most haunting sound you can leave behind is nothing. Because when you've truly moved on, you don't check who's watching. You don't hope they're hurting. You just live freely, fully, far beyond their reach. And that's what I've done. No revenge, no rage, no wreckage, just the quiet kind of strength that doesn't ask to be seen. Because in the end, she stayed in the house. But I kept the peace. And that's the only closure I ever needed. Real men don't explode. They exit. Subscribe for more power stories.